it is okay to prefer yourself. It is okay to prefer your family. It is okay to prefer your children over other people. It is. It doesn't mean that you manipulate someone to get what you want for that preference.
Right.
Okay. So for you personally, there is a balance, but you have to know in your heart you're doing the right thing. But you also have to know in your heart why you're doing the right thing.
Hey, everybody. Thank you again for joining the On the Exit podcast. We're super excited to have you listening today. And again, I'm your co-host, Caleb, here in the studio with Aaron.
How's it going, everybody? Aaron here. Excited to join you guys for another episode on the Exit.
Yeah. And I'm personally excited, Aaron, about the guest that we have with us, joining us on the podcast today, Michael Crowder. Thank you for joining us, Michael.
Pleasure.
Yeah. Michael is a personal family member. He's first cousin by marriage to me, but the reason we're having him on the podcast is he's a tremendously successful, well-versed, and versatile entrepreneur, has been for many years, and was my first, I would guess, say, personal business mentor in my, I don't know, 19, 20, 21 years old, around that time.
Yeah.
Learned a lot from Michael, had a really strong impact in my life. And so it's personally exciting for me to get to interview you, Michael. So just want to say thank you again for jumping on the show.
Yep. Thanks, Michael. This is going to be
Absolutely.
great.
Yeah. So want to dive in. I mean, I know that you've got hours and hours worth of value that you could add and things that you could say. Would love to hear a little bit about kind of the early years of your entrepreneurial journey, where you got started, kind of in tech sales and things like that. Anything that you want to share from kind of your beginnings, where you got started?
Sure. Well, first of all, I got married to your first cousin when I was 19 and she was 19.
Yeah.
And we've been married now 30 years. And we got married. I was always an entrepreneur. I was an entrepreneur since my eyes opened. I remember starting my first business when I was 8 years old, and I was a runner at the senior center. So they would have coin collector shows on the weekends, and they were all old. They were a lot of veterans and a lot of people in wheelchairs, and they were just elderly. So they would give me a buffalo nickel and a silver quarter and say, run it over there and collect the money and bring it back. And then they would give me a little something for doing that. And sooner or later, I had enough inventory that didn't cost me anything that I ended up setting up at their shows and selling it back to them. So that worked out well. And so that really got me started in kind of that mindset of not just selling something, but generating a profit. Profits, we've always heard that. Jim Rohn said it, profits are greater than wages. Profits are better than wages. And if you can generate profit, then, that there's no limit to what you can create with that mindset. And so, my wife and I went to college. We were engaged, and then we dropped out, and I started a small company, and I connected myself with a technology company in Charlotte. And I'll never forget talking to the CEO, because I had zero experience. I just got married, and I literally went to him and I said, hey, what can I do? He said, I'll give you a table, I'll give you a phone, and I'll give you no money. You eat what you kill. And I remember, and there was a bullpen. So I'll tell you this quick story. There was this bullpen, and the administrator downstairs, when someone would call in to buy a computer cable or a monitor or a 4 meg RAM chip, right? Talk about aging myself, but not just my white beard, right? Or they would call out, we need a contractor on line one, because we were all independent contractors. We're in there just like real estate or whatever, but we're there to sell technology. And she said, we need a contractor line one. Well, I grabbed the phone fast. And the guy beside me was like this veteran. He was in his 40s. He was the number one sales guy. He crushed everybody else. I beat him to the phone, and he gave me the meanest look. I'll never forget. His name was Ron. And I said, hey, this is Michael. How can I help you? And the guy on the other line's name was Mark. And he said, we're in desperate need. I said, what's wrong? He said, well, we have a food service company here in Charlotte, and our main payroll computer's down, and we can't do anything. We need this cable. So I get my phone, my pen, and I'm writing on my sheet. He's saying DB9 female. And I know, it was like he was talking in German. And so I wrote it all down. I ran down to the warehouse, and I asked Richard, I said, do we have this? And I held the sheet of paper up, and he said, yes, we have it right here. And I said, how much is it? He said, it's $40. I got it. I ran to my truck that had just wrecked, right? And I'm driving in my old Nissan truck across town. I pull up in this $1 billion company. I walk in. I was 6'1", weighed 140 pounds. I'm walking in with a cable into this, and the main executive assistant front said, "Do you have our cable?" I said, "Yes." She said, "Hold on." And Mark comes running from the back, and I hand him the cable, and he said, "You saved our life. What do I owe you?" And I said, "You don't owe me a dime." He said, "What do you mean?" I said, "I want you to know what it's going to be like to work with me."
Wow.
And so when I left, so fast forward, the next week, Mark calls me and says, "Hey, would you mind quoting these laptop computers for our salespeople?" And then we started doing business together. And then he called and he told me, "Hey, I'm going to put you on the phone with Sam from Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania. And he's the top buyer." And fast forward, guys, I ended up doing over $5 million in sales with them in the first 3 years of a company that only did $1 million in revenue the first year I started. So it was just treating him right and doing things a little bit different that led to me launching into that career. And then later I became president of that company, and we grew it about 1,800%. We became one of the fastest 50 growing technology companies. And I know we're on video. I got to show you one thing real fast, and then I'll get on. But this is actually, I pulled this out. This is the 1998 North Carolina Technology 50. This had SAS and IBM and all that, and we beat them all. But I'll show you this because I was 24 years old. I was president of this company. I'm back here with the goatee, but right here, look here, right here, these two guys were the founders of Red Hat.
Wow.
They sold that company to IBM, and it became one of the largest technology purchases in the world, and no one knew who they were in 1998. So all of that came from running a cable across town, trying not for my truck to break down. So there you go.
That's amazing.
Such an awesome just mindset, of trying to add value to people and thinking about relationships. And we've all talked to people where you can just sense it's about the commission or a fee or it just gets in the way, however we can just not focus on that. And of course we all want to get paid as entrepreneurs, but I think that's something that we in our business always try to do is not focus on that. And then that's not why I think Caleb and myself both have even other motivations of why we're even in business. It's not just to make money, it's, and people can sense that, and your story was kind of like when you're like, "Hey, you don't owe me a dime." It's like, you mean it though. You're like, "Hey, I'm really just trying to add value to you." And it's so different than the approach that a lot of people have,
And Aaron, you can't fake it. This is the thing. This is the thing I see in the marketplace is you can spot a phony a mile away. It can never be about the check. And listen, there's plenty of money to go around, right? There's plenty of money. And, I look at it like you always have to create stories for yourself and for your client. And I'll give you some dated material, but I mean, people read, Think and Grow Rich still, right? It's written in Old English. You know what I mean? So but if you want to, one of the most impactful things I ever listened to was an interview by the guys who wrote The Millionaire Next Door. In preparation for writing that book, they did like this 6-hour, they released the 6 hours of interviews with these deca millionaires. And it's called Networking with Millionaires. It's out of print, but you can still buy it on Amazon. And it's 6 hours of interviews with people that the guy that's worth $25 million that owns the recycling center for cars, the junkyard. It's the guy that was the number one blue jean salesman in the world. And the way he got into the biggest client is he found out the size of his administrative assistant's jeans, and she wore an 8. And he had special jeans made for her with a size 6 in the back and mailed them to her. Right. And all of a sudden it's things like that take care of people that is missing in the marketplace, because in most of entrepreneurism, there's a tremendous amount of selfishness when it comes to the individual who's trying to make the dollar.
Yeah. So how have you, I think, because it seems like that's something that you're really solid and convinced of now, and obviously you were solid and convinced of in the beginning. How has that kind of value guided you every step of the way? And have there been any moments where you've lost sight of that value?
I think probably, we were talking before about, looking back, would you do things different? What would you do different? And I think the biggest piece I would tell you is picking your partners wisely.
Yeah.
Regardless of whether you're financially or fiduciarily, involved with them, whether they're investors or whether they're partners or whether they're just people you go to work every day with, be careful where you plant your flag. Be careful who you're in business with, who you're yoked with. That's been my challenge over the years. I've had some great partners, and then I've had some partners that I really would go back and undo a lot of that. And some of that also is when you have that personal feeling where you want to help somebody, right? When you're out there wanting to help your client, and when you truly, like when you really want to help them get their printer back up, it also opens you up for vulnerability to be taken advantage of, because people will take advantage of that spirit in a person. And so you have to guard yourself. Over my career, I look back and I say there's places I should have had guardrails up, because there's things that I did right and things that I did wrong in business. I've failed and I've succeeded. But looking back at that, the one thing I would fix is I would put those guardrails up against personal partnerships and being connected with people in a financial way.
Awesome. And now, kind of your story started there. How long were you with that first company? And then you started in sales and kind of worked toward becoming one of the managers, or even what was it, CEO of that company?
Yeah, I was president of that company until 2001. And I actually resigned like the week before 9/11.
Wow.
Which is a whole different conversation. There was I think a little hedge of protection there. But then I'd done one thing in my entire career. So, I just went on the rebound and started company after company after company after
Wow.
company. And I learned what not to do. But one of the coolest stories is I got the chance to own golfers.com with my brother and with Dwight Clark, who caught the catch from Joe Montana, the most famous catch in the history of the NFL. And Dwight and I became super good friends. And I actually ended up selling that company, playing in the Mizuno Pro-Am. I wore my Pebble shirt at Pebble Beach. And it was just,
Wow.
it was a miracle. It was just a miracle of how that happened. And I'll never forget that. Dwight ended up passing away from ALS a handful of years ago. But I'll give you the fast version, because part of what I want to talk to you guys just briefly about is writing your story. This is the thing that's the most important for me. I've really thought about writing a book because I want to tell this story to so many people. Is be intentional about writing your story. Write it down. Don't forget it. And I'll give you an example. I mean, this just happened, but when you're intentional about creating your story, sometimes things just open up for you. So we were out in 2008. I was out at Pebble Beach playing in the Mizuno Pro-Am for 4 days. It was the day after the AT&T, so the PGA stands were still up at Pebble. It was a gorgeous day, and I'm about to tee off, and I'm there talking about selling golfers.com. And it was going to be one of the biggest website sales of all time. And I get a call from my brother. So it's my brother and Dwight and I. We were the three partners. And my brother calls me and he says, "Hey, there's a guy on the phone who wants to talk to you about buying golfers.com." I said, "Well, I'm about to tee off at Pebble with the guy that's wanting to buy it." He said he told me to make you take the call. And so I get on the phone. I'm on the putting green at Pebble with the Rolex, the clock right behind me. I walk down the road and I'm on the phone with this guy. And he's like, "What do you want for the site?" And I went, "Just talking to you on the phone right now makes me feel like I'm cheating on my wife. That's because I'm the guy on the putting greens buying this from me right now. And I'm going to be playing golf with him for 4 days." He said, "How much do you want to walk?" So I gave him this crazy number and he said, "Okay."
Wow.
So I went and teed off. I hit a 3-iron in the rough on the right on Pebble. I'm walking down beside my caddy. My BlackBerry buzz is in my pocket. I pull it out and it's a contract,
Wow.
a 7-figure contract. And so I leave there, and I tell you this because I went back to Charlotte after we did this, and I called Dwight, and Dwight said, "Meet me at the Palm restaurant tonight." So I walk in, and he literally picked me up and kissed me on the cheek because, and I won't go into anything personal, but there was a reason that was miraculous for how this worked out, and the amount of money that he was getting was incredible for that moment in his life. And so I say that because that's just part of the journey, right? And then you have those failure stories as well, but all of those are what make you who you are.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that is awesome. So a lot of life principles, right? And lessons and things that can be
So
applied
many
to
things.
other
Yeah.
entrepreneurs, other businesses. What would be another, I guess, lesson or point of, wisdom for a young entrepreneur in their 20s? A lot of vision, a lot of energy, but not the same amount of experience.
Okay. First of all, it's how you treat people. Caleb and I were talking about my favorite business book. I'm gonna go ahead and talk about it.
Yeah.
Is it's always been Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People, right? It just
Yes.
has been.
Yeah.
But the longer I go through my business career, I really relate more to another book that I don't even think it's in print anymore, but it's by a guy named Frank McGuire. And the book is called You're the Greatest. And if you want something you're gonna go, wow,
Hmm.
read
Yeah.
You're the Greatest. I mean, this guy, he started FedEx with Fred Smith. He started Kentucky Fried Chicken with the Colonel. He sat in the boardroom when they sold it. He hired Ted Koppel at NBC. His story through time is ridiculous, but the way he treated everyone, the first thing he would do every time he saw someone is he'd shake their hand and say, "You're the greatest." And that's how he
Wow.
started it. And so I say that because it is about the people. And I'll give you kind of it's crude, but I'm gonna say it anyway because I think it's great. I went and I watched. This was probably in the late '90s. There was a guy that had sold his company for bazillions of dollars, and he was speaking at the BMW plant in Greer, South Carolina. And I'm sitting in this little audience area, and he's speaking, and he said, "I just made my 46th millionaire." He said it was my secretary because he gave portions of the shares to his people right before he sold it so he could make millionaires. But he said something in there that I wrote down, and I wrote it in my brain, and I've said it 1,000 times, and it's horrible, but I'm gonna say it anyway. He said, he said personally, he said my customers, he said my employees, he said my interactions, he said I kiss them till their lips bleed. That's what he said. And I'll never forget it. And I say that because it is about that. I mean, you got to
Yeah.
guard yourself because there's a bunch of people out there that don't have your best interest at heart.
Hmm.
But for
Sure.
young people, I think if you go overboard making an impact on people and studying leaders who impacted people, not just who led. It's one thing to lead. I'm not talking about Patton, right? General Patton. It's a different kind of leadership, right? You're telling somebody to go out and die. It's a different kind of conversation
Yeah.
than I want to do business with you. How can I help you? How can I assist you? Those kind of things. So that's really, I mean, from my perspective, I think that's what I would share. And if we have time, I'll tell one story that relates to that
Please
directly.
do. Please
I
do.
remember there was a lady named Marion when I first got started at the technology company. We did some business with the city of Charlotte, North Carolina, and the buyer was Marion. And when I was 19 years old, I went over to the city of Charlotte to the building, the headquarters, and I went upstairs and I met her and I shook her hand and I said, "You don't know me from anybody, but here's my home number. And I know things arise. I'm not asking you to give me your contracts. I'm just asking you to give me the scraps. Let me show you." And the next thing I know, she sends me a message and says, "Michael, I want you to bid the city's RFP for every computer and every laptop in the entire city, the police department, everything."
Mm.
And I said, "Marion, I don't do that. Like, I'm a buyer for you. I'm not a seller to you." That's exactly what I told her. And she said, "I want you to fill it out anyway." And guys, I wrote the RFP in pencil. I wrote it in pencil. And at the bottom of it, I put, "I'm not here to sell to you. I'm here to buy for you. If you want that type of savings and that type of service, choose me." And then I get a call the next week. Back then, they held the city council meetings on TV. And that was when Richard Vinroot was the mayor of Charlotte, right before Pat McCrory, who became the governor. And somebody called me and said, "Turn on the city council meeting." Well, on the city council meeting, they have my RFP, which was not the lowest. It was second lowest. And they have another RFP, and they're arguing why to take me. And they
Wow.
gave me that contract, and I held it for the maximum term. I put every laptop in every city, in every police car in the city for the first time, all of that. And it was within 2 years of starting, all because of that one conversation about buying for you versus selling to you.
Yeah. No, that's amazing. I love that. I mean, I don't know if you have any, I'm sure you do, any wisdom on this, because there is a lot of talk of add value, add value, add value in the marketplace today, and digital sales and online sales. It's, add value, it's customers first, it's people first. But I don't know, it's kind of always feels like it's shaped with the narrative of so that it comes back and benefits you later. And you mentioned earlier, when you were sharing about how you can spot a phony a mile away. I believe that you can. I just don't know that everyone can because there's a lot of people out there that are really, and I'm not trying to
Mhm.
speak ill of anybody. I don't think
Yeah.
that's a good idea either, I guess. But I would love to just hear if you have any wisdom on, how do you, one, keep your heart in check, personally, to ensure that there's not, those selfish motives brewing underneath the surface. But then two, how do you discern and recognize that in someone else?
Well, first of all, let's talk about you. It is okay to prefer yourself. It is okay to prefer your family. It is okay to prefer your children over other people. It is. It doesn't mean that you manipulate someone to get what you want for that preference.
Right.
Okay. So for you personally, there is a balance, but you have to know in your heart you're doing the right thing. But you also have to know in your heart why you're doing the right thing. Right. Because for many years in my business, I preferred the business partner. I preferred the person who invested in me. Instead of preferring my own, instead of making decisions about my family and what would benefit my family, I would make a decision what benefited someone else. And you have to guard yourself against that, because it is for someone who does have a heart to help people, you also have a tendency to do that. And so you have to guard yourself. When it comes to spotting other people, it's just discernment. I mean, some people can do it, some people can't. Some people, it takes them getting burned to learn how. And at the end of the day, there's nothing wrong with failure unless you stay there, right? I mean, we've heard that. There's nothing wrong with failing unless you stay there. I mean, I remember I had certain goals that I wanted to do before I was 30, and I met most of them. But by the time I was 35, I had unwound most of them.
Wow.
By the time I was 40, I had rebuilt it again. And then, so there was this vacillation, this cyclical up and down and up and down. That is entrepreneurism. If people don't want that, then they need to go get a job somewhere and have a paycheck for their entire life and get a pension. And there's nothing wrong with that. But we're talking about leadership, we're talking about entrepreneurism, and the risk that's associated with that. There is risk, but you have to clearly define what your goals, motivations are going into anything. And it brings up one other thing that I would recommend. I know I'm a verbal processor, in case you guys don't know,
No, I
but
love it.
one thing that I would do going back is define the end in the beginning,
Mhm.
right? You always say begin with the ending in mind. Yeah, I get all that.
Mhm.
But did you define what the end looked like? Because that was something that would have headed off many heartaches in my life, is if I would have sat down with my partners or my buddy or my friend and said, okay, here are the potential outcomes from this. Let's talk about the most positive outcome that could happen. Let's talk about the most negative outcome that could happen, so that we have a vision going forward to see what direction this is going. And so that's something else I would give people advice on is, really don't just begin with the end in mind, define the end before you begin.
Wow.
Awesome. One other thought. I guess I'm just curious what your motivation is. Like, you got the big check. I'm sure you've gotten many big checks, over the years. What motivates you to keep working and to keep, you're still actively starting more businesses and doing sales and adding, connecting. Why are you, I guess, doing that? And I probably know the answer, because you're not motivated by money necessarily. But what's your thought on that versus, like, because for a lot of entrepreneurs or folks, it's like, hey, I just want to get to a certain place financially and then I don't have to work anymore. What's your thought on that?
Right. And there's nothing wrong with that. For me personally, like I said, it's been the mountains and valleys. We talked about the mountains. We haven't talked
Uh-huh.
about the valleys. Right. So it's not like, oh, wow, hit a home run, done. No, it's hit a home run. Oh my gosh, I got 41 outs in a row. You know what I mean? It's like, so there is motivation. And plus, I mean, I'm only 49 years old, right? I mean, I started early. I just did. I started early. And I do have a lot of experience. I got a white beard. I mean, I don't think that's by accident. And I have no hair. That's why I have a hat on. So my point is there's some of that. But for me, I don't work the way I used to work.
Mm.
And I'm not going to work the way I used to work. And my wife and I had this conversation today. She said,
Wow.
all of that stuff about having to be out of balance is totally wrong.
Mm.
And listen, you hear that, be out of balance for a season. So in a season, let me tell you something. After 30 years, if you get yourself out of balance, you stay out of balance.
Mm.
And that's somebody talking from 30 years experience of being out of balance, a whole bunch of it. And so that's why I'm not going to speak to when you walk, when you stop. I don't think you do. Your motivations just change. Like, I don't think I do think for myself, my wife right now, because we're empty nesters now, and it's phenomenal. We love it. But my mind is shifted from, wow, what do our investments look like? What can we do? To what's my grandchildren? What are their lives going to be? And I don't have grandchildren. Well, what is that going to look like? The Bible says a good man leaves an inheritance to his children's children. He doesn't say children. He says children's children. Why? Because he wants you to realize you got to build something that surpasses one generation.
Yeah.
So it's not a matter of stopping. It's a matter of, what are your real goals? What is your true accomplishment going to be when it's all done for you?
Yeah, no, I love that. Well, Michael, we have 5 questions we ask every guest
What?
at the end of our episode, and so I think you answered one of them. It was related to your favorite business book. So that's the first question.
Yeah. So it's You're the Greatest, right? Did we get that right?
You're the greatest
By
by Frank McGuire. I
Yeah,
recommend
Frank
it. I'm telling you.
McGuire.
We'll check that out.
I have to look it up and see if there's still a copy of it kind of hanging
It's on,
around.
it's on
out there.
eBay, Amazon, unless I recommend it a couple times a week. So
Yeah.
I don't know how long it'll last, but
You
it
gotta start
really is
getting-
worth it.
You got to start getting commissions off the
Yeah.
recommendations.
I think he was 80 when I saw him speak 20 years ago. So I don't even.
Okay. So he's like, yeah.
Question number 2, we ask this to everyone because of, we're our mission is to help people create time and financial freedom and help them to separate, their active involvement, the hours they put in from some of their investments. So what would you say for yourself is what portion of your income comes through passive sources or businesses that you've set up versus your active day-to-day work?
I would probably, what I would do instead, because I'm in a different season right now with what's happening with our businesses, and we're very excited about it. If you take the last 10 years, I would say probably 40% of my income has been passive.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Cool.
So what is one thing that you wish you could do more of, but your business commitments hold you back?
That's a great one, and it's a long answer. I'm gonna give you a fast version. It is play golf, and here's why.
I clued in on that one.
I used to play, and I felt guilty every time I played because I wasn't working. And for 10, 15 years or longer, every time I played, I felt guilty. And so if I could go back and talk to the younger Michael, I would say, take some time for yourself, cut your phone off, enjoy yourself. And so that would be it.
Yeah.
Play golf.
That
That
kind
kinda
of
ties
leads
into our
next
next
I'm doing a
question,
lot. I'm doing a lot of that right now. So it's fun.
Yeah.
I love it.
Well, that's our next question too, which you partially answered. Is what would you go back and tell your 19-year-old self when you were just starting out?
Give us 2 or 3 more things besides just take time for yourself. Yeah.
Guard yourself from the people you think have your best interest at heart. Now, it doesn't mean don't believe them, but guard yourself, because most people have their own interest at heart. And if you have a heart for other people, it's pretty easy to get manipulated. So, and I don't want to sound cryptic because it hadn't happened a lot, but just looking back, I would tell myself, don't be so fast to give something away. Don't be so fast to give everything you did here away. Don't be so fast to give a portion of your company away, right? Prefer your family. It's okay.
Mm-hmm. Great. And then what was the last question? Oh yeah, your strategy for creating time freedom and financial freedom. What's your plan, I guess, over the next, 10, 20 years as far as passive income, financial freedom, being able to play more golf? What are your thoughts on that or your goals?
Really looking on return on investment. I mean, just looking at return on investment, balancing, like when I was 20 and 30, I was high risk, right? I was trading options, right? I was trading uncovered. Like I was like, cause I'm like, if I lose it all, I'm 30, I can get it back. Different mindset back then. Like I was super high risk. Now I'm looking at, okay, I want to guard myself. I want to protect myself. I want to balance. So how can I earn 10%, versus, how can I double by Friday? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just, so I would say for me, it is being a little more reserved, but studying and learning. Like I haven't spent a lot of time learning the real estate piece. I haven't spent a lot of time learning places that you can get, high returns balanced with, low risk. So,
Yeah.
so a lot of that for me is education. As a matter of fact, I've literally printed all this to read this weekend on studying on new ways that I've never thought about, that are, because you study different things when you're 25 and have some money than you do when you're 49.
Yeah.
That's cool. So being
Yeah.
a lifelong learner,
Yes, sir.
it sounds like.
Always.
Well,
Great.
as we wrap up, Michael, would just love if there's a way that our listeners can connect with you, continue to learn and grow from you. I mean, you're obviously a tremendously gifted coach, or if there's other ways. I just love what's the one big way that our listeners can connect with you.
I mean, I'm on social media. You can look me up on Instagram. Michael G. Crowder is my Instagram. Michael Crowder on Facebook. I have a speaker page, which I don't really use that much anymore. But then I have my personal page. You hit me up on there. You message me. I respond to DMs. So, but yeah, if anybody has anything or wants to give any feedback or anything, feel free to reach out.
Absolutely. Thank you again so much, Michael, for joining us for the On the Exit podcast. It's been amazing. Feel super inspired.
Yeah. Thanks so much for joining us, and
Yeah.
dropping some knowledge on our listener base.
Absolutely.
Well, I hope
All
it's
right,
helped.
everybody. Thanks again for listening today to Own the Exit. Until next time, go ahead and leave us a 5-star review on iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.